Point. Well, I'm Zach Welsh, and this is my wife, Johanna Welsh. We are so glad to be here with you this morning. That's right, we're going to the Dominican Republic as world missionaries, and we've actually been working with CCF, or Campus Christian Fellowship, here in Skagit Valley for a number of years. It's known as Chi Alpha nationally. That's the AG's college ministry. And we love City Point. Y'all have been so supportive of our ministry financially. You've opened your building to us to have prayer times and staff meetings here. And anytime a student is looking for a church, we love to recommend this one. And Raj and some others have come here. And so we just love this church. And we're glad to be here this morning. Happy to see familiar faces. And yeah, we're here visiting this morning because the Lord is calling us into something different. So in September, we'll be leaving for the Dominican Republic, and we'll be working on the oldest university campus in the Western Hemisphere. It's called Universidad Autónoma de Santo Domingo, and it has 170,000 registered students, which is just insane. That's Texas A&M is the largest public university in America, and it's 75,000 students. It's like 4 UWs plus, 5 Skagits, five Skagit Valley colleges. And it's a huge school with huge opportunity to reach students for Jesus.
And this change for us has been several years in the making. So today I'll get to share a bit about what God has called us to and how we got here. And so much of our story revolves around encountering Jesus over many years. And it's driven by the hope that we can help others encounter Jesus as we go. So with that in mind, as I was praying about what I could share with you all this morning, I felt like the Holy Spirit kept bringing to mind John 4, the passage of Jesus encountering a woman at the well. So Zach's going to read that for us, and then we'll go through it verse by verse.
Awesome. John 4, verse 3. So he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now he had to go through Samaria, so he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near a plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." He told her, "Go call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." "Woman," Jesus replied, "believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, and has now come, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth." The woman said, "I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us." Then Jesus declared, "I am the one speaking to you. I am he."
Before we get into this passage, this story, I have a question I want you all to consider this morning. What encounters have you had with Jesus? What grounding moments in your life have you had for your faith in Jesus? Think about the first time God physically healed my body miraculously. What are some of these moments for you? We'll come back to that. But let's get into this passage. So starting at verse 3 through 6. So he, Jesus, left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. So just in these first few verses, we get a lot of context for what's going on in this story. The verse says Jesus had to go through Samaria. And this is interesting to think about because, like it says in the passage, Jewish people typically avoided Samaritans. They didn't get along. So when a Jewish person was trying to go back to Galilee, they would not go straight through Samaria. If Jesus is here, he's trying to get up here, Samaria is here, most Jewish people would go roundabout like that to avoid the Samaritans. Oh, I'm sorry. They would do this because the Samaritans were a lower social, cultural status. They worshiped God in a way that the Jewish people didn't agree with, so Jewish people just didn't associate with them. And Jesus knew all these things, but he was like, I have something that I need to do. I have something I need to do, so we're just going to go straight through. We're going to go through Samaria. And this is when they meet. This encounter happens. Verse 7, when a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. You are a Jew and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? Jews do not associate with Samaritans. One thing I love about this story is that it shows how Jesus is willing to cross boundaries to meet people. To meet people he wouldn't have met otherwise. And if we only had this story to learn about who Jesus was, something to note is how intentional Jesus is to cross these cultural and social boundaries. If Jesus even touches this woman's cup, he's going to be ceremonially unclean. He's a Jewish rabbi, a man. He's not supposed to talk to this woman. The Samaritan woman knows all this too, and she's like, excuse me, sir, you and I both know that this is a bad idea on a lot of levels, a lot of them for you. Why are you doing this? But Jesus, he's aware of all this, and he still pushes ahead with the conversation because what he has planned is more important than the cultural norms that are on the surface. In verse 10, Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. If you only knew the gift that I had for you, how deeply I can change your life. If you only knew, you would ask me for a drink. I think Jesus says this with a lot of kindness and sincerity towards this woman. He's talking about living water. Living water, this image pops up all over the Bible. Water is a symbol of life, especially in this desert where people would literally die without this well. And the irony is, this woman points out, she's like, you don't have a cup, and this well is really deep. How can you give me a drink? This is a huge claim. Are you better than our ancestor Jacob, our ancestor who gave us this well? And the reality is, absolutely, Jesus is way better. She just doesn't know it yet. Jesus says, yes, I don't have a cup, but you still need a drink from me. I am much greater than you know. In verse 13, Jesus answered her, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will be in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. With this well water, you're always going to be thirsty again. You'll always have to come back to this well and work for it. Contrasted with Jesus' water, you'll never thirst again. This just flows out like a spring. Are any of you all runners? I'm a runner. I heard a pastor talking about this passage once, and he was training for a marathon, and he was going for a really long run. And for whatever reason, he did not prepare very well, and he did not have enough water for his run. So he's at like mile 7, and he is getting desperately thirsty. So thirsty, he just needs something to drink. And there's nothing around him, so he's just looking around like, is there anything that I can drink anywhere? Maybe a puddle, a bucket, and suddenly ahead of him on the sidewalk, he sees an open soda can. And he's like, ooh, I just need something to drink. So he goes for it. He picks it up, he puts it to his mouth, he tilts the can back, and this mystery sludge just slides into his mouth. So gross. This is not living water. This is not what Jesus is talking about. Maybe you've never been this desperate for water before, but I think it's safe to say all of us can understand that feeling of thirst, of really, really needing something to drink. Jesus is saying that drinking regular water, it's like that. You're going to be thirsty. We'll always need more as long as we're alive. It's not a weakness, it's just a reality. Jesus is talking about a different kind of water, a kind of water that's alive, a kind of water that every heart longs for, knowingly or unknowingly. A kind of water that's so refreshing, you're never going to be thirsty again. This woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so I won't get thirsty and I won't have to keep coming here to draw water." Who would not want this? She's in the desert at noon. It's the hottest part of the day. She's doing her regular chores, and this random man who's breaking all the social norms is telling her that there's a kind of water that will last forever. He definitely has her intrigued, I'd say. And I know that I can relate to this when I think back to my first few encounters with Jesus. When I went to college, I had a nominal belief in God. I'd grown up going to church, but to be honest, it was really for the donuts and playing foosball and seeing my friends. It was not much more than that. I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. But thankfully for me, my roommate, when I got to college, did. She was a serious follower of Jesus. And we were walking home from the gym on campus on a Friday night, and we heard this really loud music coming from the largest lecture hall on campus. And Carrie, my roommate, was like, "Let's go check it out. That's worship music." And I was like, "Okay." And we walked into the room to see 400 students with their hands up in the air, praising Jesus together. I had never seen anything like that before. It was so strange to me, but it was also beautiful and really moving. People just having such a deep and meaningful connection with God. And there was a few This was a CCF gathering, and there was a few of the CCF staff in the back of the room, and they gave us candy and books and welcomed us and invited us to stay. I think my roommate wanted to, but it was a little overwhelming for me, so I was like, oh, this is so nice. Yeah, thank you. I think I'm going to go. Maybe I'll come again. I probably won't come again. But thankfully, for me, college students who are empowered by the Spirit of Jesus are very persistent. So there is a senior from CCF, and she led a Bible study in my dorm. She heard about me and my roommate, and she came knocking on our door and invited us to her Bible study over and over and over and over. And my roommate was all about it right away, so she started going. And for whatever reason, I just resisted until the start of winter quarter. This girl named Cynthia, in probably a last-ditch effort, she sent me an email and was like, Johanna, I would love it if you came to Bible study with us and learned about Jesus with us. What do you say? And for whatever reason, that did the trick. So I was like, okay, I'll come to Bible study. And for the first time, I started learning about what the Bible said. I started learning about the person of Jesus. I started learning about what Jesus has to say about my life. And it changed me. I came to college looking for meaning in the typical things an 18-year-old might: friends, dating, grades, partying. I did not expect that the deep ache I felt in my soul would be met so profoundly by the person of Jesus. It changed me. What were these initial encounters with Jesus like for you? Maybe you were a young child. Maybe you were a young adult like me. Excuse me. Maybe it was in a later season of life. But I want you to think also about who were the people that helped you get there? Who were the people that brought you to church, that encouraged you to come to Bible study, that shared the gospel for the first time with you? Those are important people, right? The more I learned about Jesus with my new Christian friends, the deeper I realized my need for him. And I was continually surprised by how Jesus met me, how well he knew me, how similarly I felt to this woman at the well. So with her, this woman at the well, at this point in the conversation, things start to take a little bit of a pivot. She just asked Jesus for this water he's been talking about, and Jesus says to her, "Go, call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you've had 5 husbands, and the man you have now is not your husband. What you've just said is quite true." Up to this point, they've been having an interesting conversation, a little mysterious with the living water, but nothing too unusual. And then Jesus just blows the cap off stuff with what he just said to this woman. And we don't know much about this woman's life because we just have this tiny window of what we just learned about her. But we can surmise her life has been unusual based on what Jesus just said. It's unusual for someone at this point in history to have been married 5 times. I mean, even today, that would probably be a little unusual if you met someone who'd been married 5 times. Again, we don't know what's going on in her life to cause this, but we know that Jesus has totally surprised her and just read her mail about what's going on in her life. Have you ever had the Lord just totally surprise you like this? I know I have. I know Zach has. He had this happen about 6 years ago, many times, but I'm going to tell you about this time 6 years ago. We were at a special nationwide Chi Alpha conference, our college ministry that we work for. and it's called the World Mission Summit. And college students from all over the country and world missionaries from all over the world come together to make space to seek the Lord, to pray for the nations, and for college students to ask the Lord, would he have them go anywhere to serve him abroad? And at this point, Zach and I weren't married, but we were dating, and we got to go with our whole crew from Bellingham to visit this conference and pray together, learn about all kinds of things. And Zach and I agreed, let's consider individually if the Lord might call us to go somewhere, because we're not married yet, so that seems wise. And the whole week long, we heard from all different missionaries these amazing stories about people being healed, about villages accepting Jesus, about Jesus just encountering people. And the ones that pulled at our hearts most were the stories about Latin America, for both of us individually. We just couldn't get them out of our heads, the crazy things that were happening. And it was the last night of the conference. Picture a big conference room. There were 6,000 people there. And Zach is having just a really sweet moment with Jesus during the worship time. And at that point, he'd been pretty set on, I am going into business. I'm going to do marketing, which he did down in Seattle for a while. And this will help me support a family well, and I'll bring Jesus into the business world. Great things. And as Zach was praying, he felt the Lord say, look at that missionary over there. I want you to go talk to him. Wherever he is serving, that's where I would want you to go. Surprising. So Zach got up and went over to talk to this missionary, and he was serving in Latin America. That was exciting. But not only that, but the Lord gave this man really deep insight into the deep inner workings of Zach's heart, stuff he wouldn't have known without the Lord just giving him insight into Zach's life. And Jesus spoke to Zach through this man he'd never met before and brought to light a few things that Zach needed to change before going on mission anywhere. And it was so good. Zach was longing to have a meaningful, rich life, thinking that being successful in marketing was the way to get there for him. But Jesus encountered him in a powerful way and said, I have another idea for you. Let's go this direction instead. And side note, the takeaway from that story is not you need to quit your business job to go be a world missionary somewhere. No. The takeaway is listen to Jesus and do what he tells you to do. Sometimes the Lord gives us these nudges, these surprise nudges. So fast forward a few years, Zach and I are married, and we've settled on we want to go to Latin America to serve Jesus together there, specifically with university students, because that's what we've been doing for 10 years. If we're going to change our language, our city, our culture, why not keep one thing familiar, We'll just keep doing college ministry. There's a big need for that down there. And we narrowed it down to a team that is working in Chile with university students and a team in the Dominican Republic also working with university students. So we called the guy in Chile and we were like, hey, do you need any help? And he was like, well, I've got 15 people coming to join my staff soon. And we were like, okay, you're great, but you don't need us. So we called the Dominican Republic, Jamie Bayo and Burley Bayo. Maybe you've heard of them. I know they've come to itinerate different places before. And the more we talked with them, the more we felt like, oh, this is the spot for us. This is what the Lord has prepared for us. Maybe you've had a moment like that where you just felt like, oh, this is the right fit for me. This is the spot Jesus has for me. We didn't expect it. but we cannot wait to go to the Dominican Republic. The Lord surprised us with a call in the world missions. I was super happy working here in the Valley for CCF. Zach was very happy to work in marketing and business. But when the Lord starts making moves in your life, it's good to just do what he says. So how did the woman respond to the surprise of Jesus knowing her story? In verse 19, the woman says, "Sir, I can see you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." "Woman," Jesus replied, "believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the spirit and in truth." Her response to him knowing her life and being a prophet isn't shame or fear, some responses we might expect. Her response is, "Wow, this man can hear from God. Maybe he can answer my questions. He's obviously a prophet." The question she asks about worship is a central part of Samaritan and Jewish life. What is the right way to worship? Samaritans said where they lived and worshiped on a mountain, that was the right spot to worship. The Jewish people said Jerusalem in our temple, that's the right spot. So they're in conflict about that. And she can tell if he's a prophet, maybe he can answer what's the right way. I think for people who believe in any kind of higher power, deity, God, this is a key question. What is the right way to worship? I mean, even between Christians here in the U.S., this is a huge question of what is the right way to worship? And all over the world, the Dominican Republic, where we're going, it's not any different. There, Catholicism is the prominent religion, but it's different than the Catholicism that we know here because it's been intermixed with witchcraft and voodoo and all kinds of things. Young people in the Dominican Republic have to work against a lot of challenges to be successful. There's extreme poverty, gangs, lack of education, poor education, teen pregnancy. When we were on campus in the DR, we got to go and do an outreach. And we had a whiteboard with a question. And it was very different than our like calm, kind of quiet ways of the Pacific Northwest. People in the Dominican Republic are like dancing and talking and like everybody's flooding to our question to come talk to us, which was really fun. And I met a student while we were doing this, and he had a lot of questions about why Zach and I were following Jesus. And we were talking through a translator. I was trying to understand where he was coming from. He was saying he'd been to a lot of different churches, Jehovah's Witness, Mormon, Christian, and he was trying to figure out what's the right way. And then it hit me. He's just like any other college student I've talked to before who's trying to figure out the right way, who's trying to seek Jesus. And it's a big question there in the Dominican Republic, just like it is here. What's the right way to worship? The evangelical church's response in the Dominican to these factors of challenge and voodoo worship, all those kind of things, as they're trying to find the right way to worship, is to swing the pendulum a bit to legalism and rules, because they want to protect their young people. The thing is, these young people have had powerful encounters with Jesus, and they are on fire to go and serve him. They just haven't been trained, so they don't know how to do that. Part of the thing that Zach and I will get to do when we go is we'll get to help raise up and disciple these young people so that they can be sent out all across Latin America to reach people who want to hear about Jesus. In Latin America, there are over 700 unreached people groups. If you haven't heard that term before, it just means a group where there's no indigenous community of believing Christians large enough with enough resources to evangelize to the people around them. So it would be like if here in Mount Vernon there were so few Christians and so few resources, we didn't have enough people to go out and reach all of Mount Vernon. Young people in the DR, they want to go. They feel the pull to go from Jesus. They just need training. And an exciting part about what we'll get to be doing is the couple we're working with, the Bayos, they've planted a church, and they're intentionally trying to look different than the typical evangelical church in the DR. They're still partnering with other evangelical churches and saying, like, we're working with you. We're not, like, jumping off the deep end. We're just doing something that's going to look a little different. Because they're intentionally trying to reach people who would never set foot inside a church. And it's working, which is exciting. One of the men who became a Christian in their church got discipled, and in just the last 3 months, he and his wife started pastoring their own church. But he was talking with Zach and I when we got to go visit, and he said that the day he got baptized, they had to close the river because of all the sin that washed away. And that just cracked us up. So all these people, they're trying to figure out the right way to worship, the right way to reflect Jesus and invite others into that, which is, kind of like what we're all trying to do as we follow Jesus. So with this woman at the well, Jesus is saying a new time is coming when everything will change. It won't matter what mountain or city you're in. You'll be able to worship God freely in spirit and in truth. This is before Jesus was on the cross, before anyone knew what was coming for him. Jesus is alluding to what he's about to do for humanity. What he's about to do on the cross is going to change everything. It won't matter your cultural or social status. What Jesus is going to do will put to rest that aching that people have in their heart for something more. His death and resurrection will put us in right relationship with God because God himself came to die in our place. So he'll give us his spirit, which used to only be in the temple, but now we are the temple. So anywhere we go, Jesus is coming with us. Meaning true worshipers can worship anywhere because we have the Spirit with us. In this story, she's like, wow. I can see that you have made some big claims. I can see you have authority. Samaritans and Jews, we agree that someone is coming, someone called the Messiah, who will explain all these things and set these things right. They've been waiting hundreds of years for someone to come and do this. So she says, they'll come, they'll explain this more fully to us, all the things we've been talking about. And Jesus is like, you're right, that person is coming, and it's me. And she is overjoyed. This is way better than what she expected. She runs back to her village, telling people, come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Come and see a man who made sense of my life. Jesus knew about the thirst in her, and this encounter gave her living water, life that is truly life. She's been changed. She even left her water jug behind. You can read if you read this story a little more, leaving the burden of her old life behind. An encounter with Jesus is so powerful that she forgets it and runs to tell everyone she knows. Jesus is about encountering people. Just like he came and met with this woman, he wants to come and sit with you and with me. He knows your life and he cares about you. I believe and have experienced that when we meet with Jesus, it changes us for the better. Like this woman, her whole life was changed. And I think Jesus' hope is that not only will these encounters shape and change us, but they'll also shape and change other people. That they'll spur us on to facilitate these kind of encounters with Jesus for others. Think back to those key encounters you had with Jesus. What happened for you to get there? For this woman, it was literally Jesus. He went to her. He was the person that went out of his way to reach her. But for all those people in her town, it was her running back to them. She was one of the first evangelists to her town. Who was it that helped you get there and hear about Jesus? He wants to encounter people here in Mount Vernon, in Skagit Valley, at the college, across the state, the country, everywhere. He's bringing revival to college campuses right now across the U.S. Just so exciting. And he wants to do that right here in Skagit Valley, too. You can be a part of this on a personal level and on a global level. On a personal level, once you have Jesus in your life, like I said, you become the temple, the vessel carrying his spirit with you wherever you go. So just think about, where are you taking Jesus with you in Skagit Valley? And who might you and Jesus encounter as you go? Globally, maybe you can't personally go to the Dominican Republic or somewhere else in the world, but you can pray for Zach and I as we go. You can pray for other missionaries as they go. You could consider giving financially to missions. That helps missionaries like Zach and I be able to go. You can be a part of this. Maybe you're someone who does want to go. Maybe you've been feeling the call to go and serve Jesus in a different context than what you're doing right now, short-term or long-term. There are so many ministries and missionaries with the Assemblies of God that you could go join. And talking with Pastor Brent or Danny about that, they can definitely help you be processing those things. I think Brent mentioned that they've been praying, you all have been praying for 20 people to go into vocational ministry. Is that right? Yeah. Maybe that could be you. So some final thoughts. This is the question I want you to leave with this morning. How can you help someone else have an encounter with Jesus? Now, I ask this knowing fully that the power of an encounter rests in the hands of Jesus, and the response of an individual is totally up to that person. We can't fabricate an encounter with God for someone else. That said, if it hadn't been for the impact of others in my life, if it hadn't been for that persistent Bible study leader knocking on my door and inviting me and then teaching me, discipling me, I would never have had a relationship with Jesus. If this woman at the well, after her wonderful encounter with a man who knew all about her life and cared about her, she just said, wow, that was so great. I'm just going to keep that to myself and not tell her town, they never would have heard the good news about Jesus, and they never would have impacted the others that they went out to go tell about him also. How can you help someone else have an encounter with Jesus? Let's pray. Jesus, I am so, so thankful for City Point Church. I'm so thankful for your presence here with us. I'm so thankful for, I can just sense the deep hearts that are longing after you, that want to learn your word, that want to grow and be discipled. Just pray that you will bless each person here this morning, Jesus, that you will move powerfully in their life, that you will help them to be an impactor for your spirit, for your power, for your presence in Mount Vernon. We love you, Jesus, and pray this in your name, Lord. Amen.